November. We have a quorum, and the chair, Alderman Burris, won't be here tonight, so I'm going to fill in for her. Could we have a motion for the approval of the minutes of the October 3rd meeting?
Move approval.
Second.
And I don't think Dar sent out a revised copy, so for the error. Okay. Are there any additions or corrections? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Well, we are real pleased tonight to have presentations from our Congresswoman, Jan SCHAKOWSKY, and also Representative Daniel BISS. So we will begin that by asking for Jan to come so we can get you in and out. And either microphone is fine, here or here or here. Either way, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And how do you want to proceed? What is it? I do have some words to start with. I don't know if you wanted to do questions. Okay.
Your words, we'd appreciate that.
I do want to talk about some of my legislative priorities, but I do want to mention in particular the relationship and the very tangible relationship between the federal government and my office and Evanston, and how in the past we've been helpful, how we're a bit more limited, but how I can continue to be helpful. I was looking over the amount, the various kinds of funding that we've been able to do over the years. It looks between 2005 and 2010, we were able to bring over my office was able to bring over $6 million to the city. An anti-gang initiative, Evanston emergency response equipment, integrated vehicle tracking and information system, public safety radio and telecommunication system, shared and road reconstruction and improvements, police technology, Ridge Avenue upgrade, citywide bicycle path network, and undercover operations personnel. And we also were able to be helpful with the Neighborhood Stabilization Program grant. Now, the things I mentioned, though, beforehand are earmarks. Those are gone. And I, for one, am very sad about that. Another way to phrase earmarks is member-directed initiatives, so that it's not as if the money isn't going to be spent. It's a matter of who helps direct those dollars to where it's needed the most. It's true that there have been abuses, but in the case of most members of Congress, and certainly true of me, every earmark I've ever gotten for the district, there's been a press release, there's been an event, it's all been on the website, completely transparent. Unfortunately, though, those days are gone. So now the position that we're in is helping with things like shepherding through grant proposals, like the wonderful work. And I have said it before, but let me say it publicly. The city was terrific in being able to get substantial amount of money for that neighborhood stabilization program, $18 million. Really, very competitive grant process, and the fact that you were able to do it is really a tribute and a feather in your cap. I know that currently you're pursuing a capital grant through the Department of Transportation's Tiger 3 capital grant program. This is in line with your West Evanston Master Plan of 2007. It goes along with the TIF, but it's the Evanston Complete Streets and Regional Biking Connections project, which would integrate economic development, affordable housing, greater sustainability, safer transportation access. And so we're going to work very hard to help do that. The other thing I just want to mention, I believe that Evanston and this community can be an innovation hub. We've got, with Northwestern University, a top research institution, knowledge-based companies, renowned incubator centers, a good relationship between government and industry. And what I want to do going forward is work with you to provide the kind of leadership and initiative to attract these kinds of job creators and this kind of innovation here in our community. So I hope we can, going forward, we can do that. The President's American Jobs Act would have an impact on Evanston, that's for sure. By helping to renovate our schools, to do infrastructure projects. I've introduced a bill which the President told me actually was a bunch of it was incorporated in his bill to create 2.2 million jobs. His is projected to create almost that many. I've been working and would love to work with you more on how we can help our small businesses here. There's a new grant program for the state of Illinois that we want to make sure that some of that money goes to businesses here in Evanston, and we can work together to direct that. I know this is a difficult time for all municipalities. To me, the meaning of trickle down is when the federal government stops spending, then all the pain also trickles down the state, the local level, and it's very difficult to maintain levels of service that we really need and our people need. Let me suggest that we ought to work together as much as possible to make sure that people in our town who are eligible for programs like the SNAP program, like Medicaid, that we make sure that they are signed up. And I say to people who, may feel some reluctance about the SNAP program, for instance, and by the way, I just did the food stamp challenge last week. It's not easy, but it's, money to buy food. That it's their civic duty, because guess what? We would gain in our own grocery stores, in our own community, one of the most stimulative dollars spent. A dollar spent on the SNAP program ripples through the economy and turns into about $9. That and unemployment insurance are the most stimulative programs that there are in our economy. But so help us help you with signing people up for these programs. If you want someone to plunk down in City Hall, in the Civic Center to do that kind of thing, you want to set up a day where we help to get people registered, collaborate with some of the local organizations. But, the money gets spent here. And that's the kind of thing that we want. Obviously, we'd prefer to do it in the way of creating jobs and having people off of assistance programs. But even so, I know the county has lost millions and millions of dollars because of people who are eligible but not signed up for SNAP and other programs. So I'm going to end there, and if you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
All right. I don't see any lights or Mayor Tisdale.
Thank you. Jan, I just wanted to be sure that you knew that we still are applying for a federally qualified health center, right. And that is a huge priority for us. So thank you for all your help, and I realize they went to rural areas.
What's the status right now of the FQHC?
The status is uncertain. We were qualified, and so we're still in a pool of people who may get an FQHC if there is more money for FQHCs. And I don't think we've been told I guess we could have a number in the list, but we don't know what our number is.
Well, I'll have our office follow up this week and find out where we are. That would be an enormous contribution to our community to have one of these wonderful community-based healthcare systems, centers that people could go to. I'll find out and report back.
We're still in the running somehow if there is a race to be run for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Alderman Rainey.
Thanks for coming, Jan. Can you tell us a little more about the new grant program for small businesses?
I wish I could. I don't think I have that with me. I believe it was $175 million for the state of Illinois, and I will get that. And I'm actually not sure about the distribution system, how, if it's a competitive grant, then at the state level that has to be applied for, and I will get that information. Is Dave here? No. Okay. Okay. I'll have to ask Dave Davis.
I'll follow up with him, too.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alderman Rainey.
What's the chance of our Tiger grant?
Well, we're gonna push as hard as we can for it. I certainly think it's a worthwhile project. I think the strength of that is that it fits in with a much larger development program. So it's a piece of a program where the city is invested heavily in making this all happen. And again, you did such a great job on the neighborhood stabilization grant proposal that we'll just keep pushing along, try and get it.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank you, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for your good leadership and all of the City Council. I really appreciate the collaboration and partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative BISS?
Well, thank you very much. It's always a challenge to follow Representative CHAKOWSKY, but I'll do what I can. I want to begin actually just by thanking you. As many of you know, I represent just a little fraction of Northwest Evanston, about 2/3 of the 6th Ward, and yet the city government has been just a joy to work with, and many of you who represent wards that don't even particularly come geographically near my district have been a joy to work with, and so I want to thank you for that, and I look forward to years of continued collaboration. I represent now parts of 10 different municipalities, and it's always very easy and clear to understand the priorities of the city of Evanston as well as its many residents, and so thank you much. I wanted to talk about 3 different points that I think are perhaps noteworthy aspects of state-municipal collaboration, and then we can open it up to questions about anything. As you may know, we're heading back to Springfield tomorrow morning for what's I think quite likely to be the last week of legislative session of this calendar year, and so I'm happy to give my predictions about that, informed or otherwise. But the first area I wanted to talk about was Commonwealth Edison and electric infrastructure. As you probably know, there was a piece of legislation that would have allowed for a rate increase to pay for infrastructure investments throughout the state of Illinois that passed the legislature in both chambers without a veto-proof majority in May, prior, of course, to the enormous storms of June and July that had such an extraordinary impact on a variety of north suburbs. That created a really important leverage opportunity because the governor had, by that point, promised to veto the legislation. So ComEd really wanted this legislation passed, and it was going to be vetoed and did not have a veto-proof majority behind it in either chamber. And so they were, frankly, looking to negotiate. And the Northwest Municipal Conference did really important work in negotiating with them to put in the legislation important restrictions to make sure there would be carve-outs for the areas that had the most problematic infrastructure and a variety of other requests regarding communication and emergency planning and so forth. And that action on the part of the mayor, the city, and the whole Northwest Municipal Conference had a real impact on the on the process and the final outcome. Now, I will say that I didn't, at the end of the day, vote for even the modified proposal. I thought that it still didn't go as far as I would have liked. But regardless, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that there were concrete and important proposals that are now in the law, which is the law of Illinois, that would not have been in place if not for the work that you did. I think that my skepticism about whether that's enough, I hope I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, we'll see, but in any case, it'll be important to closely monitor what happens going forward, because, historically there's been a difficulty in getting adequately efficient response or good information out of Commonwealth Edison, and I would be very enthusiastic to work with all of you going forward to make sure that the statutory changes that were put in place last week in Springfield, as well as the agreement that was made between Commonwealth Edison and the conference, really results in the needed actual service improvement that all of you and I are primarily interested in. The second thing I wanted to make those of you who weren't there aware of was a meeting that occurred just, subtraction, help me, 4 days ago over at the District 65 building. It was a meeting put on by the Joint District 65-202 Legislative Task Force, in which myself and Evanston's other legislators, Representative Gable and Senator Schoenberg, spoke and took questions from a whole variety of different education stakeholders from across Evanston beyond just participants in the Legislative Task Force. And I think the basic theme of the evening was the state is in a pretty challenged fiscal position. We're seeing now in the current budget, the FY12 budget, nominal year-on-year cuts to education spending in a way that has not happened for a number of decades. It seems, frankly, quite likely that that will continue going forward. And so the hope was to begin a conversation about other collaborative approaches between state government, local government, community leaders, and the school districts to help do what the state has been unable to find increased financial support to do. There were three areas that were primarily discussed. One was kind of nutrition and health among the students in our two school districts. One was early childhood education, and one was education as a vehicle for workforce development and as well as post-secondary education preparation. And look, it was just a beginning discussion, but I think it was important to get that set of people in the room together and to begin working together. And certainly I feel confident speaking for my colleagues in the legislature that we're eager to do whatever can possibly be done to help support the two school districts and to support your effort to work with the school districts on these three and other areas. The final thing I wanted to say is something which has been a very kind of visible, contentious issue in the state budgeting situation as we have this enormous fiscal problem that's required dramatic action on a variety of fronts. And that is the interaction between state and local government funds. So there's three areas that I think bear discussion. The first and most obvious is the local government distributive fund. As obviously all of you know, of the 5% personal income tax that Illinois levies, 0.3% goes back to local governments and 4.7% remain with the state government. That's what I think is best described as a historic partnership that dates to the institution of the Illinois income tax, and there was an enormous amount of, at a minimum, rumor that that was going to change in this past legislative session. And to be blunt, I don't know that that's going to go away. The budgetary pressures are great enough that every rumor about a spending cut or every rumor about a tax increase should be given some credence and may reappear until we're in a very different fiscal climate. That said, as I hope all of you know, I didn't support those proposals in the past spring. And I frankly worry that, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'll just keep on talking for a second. I worry that when you look at expenditures that the state government participates in, when you need to make a cut, what you ought to be doing is ranking them by least important to most important. But what sometimes happens instead is you rank them from most easy to understand to most abstract and distant. And transfers to other units of government wind up feeling to the appropriators as fairly abstract, distant expenditures because It just says LGDF in the budget. It doesn't say this many firefighters, this many police officers, and so forth. So I have tried very hard in the legislature to encourage the budgetary process to be one that is as thoughtful as possible and relies on actual assessment of the consequences all the way at the ground level where the dollars are or are not being spent, not just one that's informed by kind of how simple or easy it is to do a given cut on an emotional level. And I'll continue making that case as the budgetary situation remains difficult, but it's a challenge, frankly, because it's really painful to cut community mental health. It's painful to cut general state aid to school districts. And this four-letter acronym, LGDF, might feel to some a lot less painful to cut before they kind of look under the hood. So I'll keep on making that case. Your advocates in the Northwest Municipal Conference make the case well. All of you have made the case very well to me, and I trust that your colleagues are doing the same in other municipalities. But do know this is going to be a continuing topic of discussion, I would guess, for some time. The second area on this point is a bill that you may be familiar with, House Bill 3828, which would do the following. As you may have heard, there is a gubernatorial veto in the state budget to reduce to zero the line item for the regional offices of education. These are elected units of government that no longer exist in Cook County and have historically been funded by the state. In fact, I think some would argue there's a constitutional mandate that they be funded by the state, but I'll let the attorneys argue that one out. And so here they are. These offices exist. There are elected officials serving in them. They provide actual services to actual school districts across the state of Illinois outside of Cook County, but now they have no budget whatsoever, and so this is a problem, obviously. And one of the approaches which is laid out in House Bill, I believe 3828, was to divert a portion of the corporate personal property replacement tax to fund those offices. And again, I think this is a pretty good example of, gosh, that's not a big deal. That's some long, complicated acronym. But in fact, I know that my friends in the municipalities, and I agree with them on this, feel that this would be opening a door to really eventually divert a substantial stream of local government revenue. And again, maybe it's the right thing to do, maybe it's the wrong thing to do, but if you do it because you've decided based upon an assessment of where the dollars actually end up, not based upon the fact that it just kind of seems easy to cut something which is not well understood. So I opposed that plan when it came up for a vote a week and a half ago, and it failed in the Illinois House, but it's on postponed consideration, and things in the legislature have a way of moving fast as deadlines loom. So I am optimistic but not certain that it's unlikely to pass. The third area that I want to touch upon briefly vis-a-vis local government resources is not relevant to the city as a home rule unit, but is relevant to our school districts and as well as to non-home rule municipalities, and that's House Bill 3793, which would kind of change around tax cap law in a way that would be really quite problematic for our local school districts, and that's just another example of legislation that was designed to appear to be accomplishing one thing, namely to ameliorate the state's kind of responsibility for local pain, but it doesn't actually do it in a way that accounts for the expenditure needs of the local governments in question. And so it's another, I think, dangerous proposal that we'll see where it goes. But in general, I think I would just say this. As you know, things move quickly in Springfield, and they move quickly in Springfield in such a way as to often minimize the amount of discussion that really happens about second and third and fourth order consequences. That's not going to change, though I think it should. But in that environment, in that unchanging environment, it's very important to us to have immediate feedback from you and to have it delivered in such a way that we can then pass it along to our colleagues who maybe have less communicative and active municipal governments that they represent. These issues will come back again and again and again, and our ability to make sure that we do the right thing rather than the easy thing relies upon having a close partnership with the municipalities. And so I appreciate the work that all of you do, and I just would ask you to continue. I know that it can be tiresome to keep on saying the same thing again and again, but do know that it's not only something that I hear, but it's something that I transmit, and that might not be said or understood absent that communication. So thank you, and of course, eager to take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Representative BISS? Mayor Tisdall, you have?
Okay. Well, I will be there tomorrow and the next day, and you can just pretend that I'm there Thursday. By then you'll know exactly what I would be saying in response to any of these anyway. I think you're absolutely right about the regional superintendents and it opening a door to the city solving all of the state's problems, and we just don't have enough money to do that, and that's why we're so concerned about that. But they've also thrown in some other offices to the list, haven't they?
Just a couple others, that's right. And I think, frankly, that's to give a cloak of philosophical justification. They've now thrown in a whole category of offices, including the county clerks and a few others. And now the argument is, well, these are a certain class of locally elected offices, and therefore it's appropriate for it to come from locally raised funds.
Perhaps I'm not philosophical enough, but I don't follow that argument, and I thought it proved what we were concerned about.
Precisely, I think it does.
Was that it was simply a way to go after city's money without any concern, as you said, about what we spend the money on.
Right, I think that's exactly right. And, you know, I don't know how you would feel about this, but I would guess that you'd be willing to enter into a discussion with the state about them taking on a portion of your responsibilities as they take away your revenue. As you know, that's not what these discussions are.
No, I've noticed that. But thanks for the thought.
Are there any other questions?
Well, I have one other question. At one point, probably before you were elected, when we were talking, we talked about a regional tech center that went from Northwestern up to U of C, and the economic development that could create for this area. Have you been so inundated in the legislature that you haven't had a chance to think of it, or given the economic climate, is that on hold for a while?
I don't think it's on hold. It's something that I maintain a very strong interest in, and I think it's now is a time of great opportunity in this specific area for Illinois, famously because of Groupon, but less famously, but no less importantly, because of a variety of successes in other more hard science-related innovation fueled businesses in the fields of biotechnology, medical devices, nanotechnology, chemistry, and so forth. One of the key questions here is, you know, how hands-on a role is it appropriate for the state to take? Is the state's job here as a facilitator, or as an actual creator, or as a selector of winners and so forth? To me, the state's greatest opportunities are, let's say, three. Number one, and this is the area that I've been able to work on so far the most, is the state is by virtue of its general fund, by virtue of its pension funds, the state is a very, very substantial investor. And it is a common tactic across the country for states to use their investment portfolios as kind of a dual-purpose entity, simultaneously to, of course, perform well and benefit the taxpayer, but also to help fuel economic growth. So one thing that we did this year was to expand the portion of the state treasurer's investments which can go toward Illinois-based venture capital, specifically to help counterbalance, really, the historical deficit that Midwestern innovative companies face when competing with coastal companies when it comes time to look for capital. That's an important thing because the coasts are absolutely full of successful companies that started here but couldn't find money here and so had to migrate. So that's one area. The next area is, it sounds kind of obvious, but it's, of course, perhaps the most important, is to make sure that our education system is appropriately aligned for the workforce needs of innovative businesses, and that includes focusing on education institutions specifically, but it also focuses on alignment, so making sure that they're adequate, that the seventh grader in District 65 who is all of a sudden excited by the sciences has access to Northwestern and so forth, because what we've seen in Illinois is a continual history of leakages out of the system where we, for example, where when I go to visit the Illinois Math and Science Academy in Aurora, and they show me their proudest two seniors from last year's graduating class, they said, and one of them is going to Princeton next year and one of them is going to UCLA next year. That's an alignment problem, right, where there's not that kind of set of connections being made. On the same type of issue, one level up, one level later in the person's age, Illinois ranks extremely high at graduating people with strong high-tech education. And yet we rank less well at having them in our workforce. And that sort of sounds like we have a job availability problem, but that's also not true. We rank extremely high at having vacancies in the IT profession. So think this through. We graduate a lot of people, but we have fewer in the workforce, and we have more jobs. That's, again, a fundamental communication problem and a fundamental pipeline problem. And the model that you should have in your mind is somebody goes to the University of Illinois, gets their engineering degree, and then by the time they're a sophomore in college, they're preparing to move to Silicon Valley after they graduate, when in fact there's a ton of well-paying, unfilled IT jobs in the Chicago region. So that's, again, a sort of alignment pipeline problem. And then the last thing I would say, which is, I think, the clearest opportunity for intergovernmental collaboration, is just the power of government as a convener is very important. The notion of creating a real blossoming high-tech economy relies upon a lot of different types of people. Pure innovators who tend to come from academia, business development types who tend to be MBAs, lots and lots of workers who usually have a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree from a community college, funders who are, people from the world of private equity and venture capital investment and stuff, and then the usual mentors and all that. That's a big set of categories of people, all of whom have these nascent networks in Illinois, but often don't know each other and aren't connected up with one another. And so ways for the government to simply create forums for these private and nonprofit sector individuals to bump into each other and begin to form collaborations is very, very valuable. Actually, to that point, I should say that Representative Gable and I will be co-hosting a set of panel discussions on this exact issue at Northwestern on the morning of Saturday, December 10th. And I'll make sure to get details to all of you immediately. I think that type of, I think we need to be, on the one hand, humble about our ability to actually go and physically make explicit on-the-ground economic decisions, but at the same time to be very ambitious about our ability to convene and kind of chart a course and articulate a vision. And it's that latter area where I see the state and the city and hopefully the federal government as well working in close collaboration.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along, we're going to have a presentation by the Mental Health Board.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm the chair of the Mental Health Board, Jeff Cochran, and as the chair, I've been charged with a brief educational piece on what we do with the Mental Health Board. Allison Stark is the vice chair of the Mental Health Board, and I'm also here tonight with Jonathan Webb, our staff liaison. On the agenda tonight for our presentation, I'll give you a brief Mental Health Board overview, followed by the history of the Mental Health Board, along with our mission, the role of the city staff on our board, and our present work plan. As an overview, the primary responsibility is to ensure the best possible environment for the promotion of mental health and other human services in the city of Evanston. We administer funding allocations from the city and the township dollars to local social service agencies. We're currently a 9-member board. We're all appointed by the mayor, and we're all Evanston residents. I just wanted to draw a brief attention to one of our members, Gene Schultz, who passed away recently, a couple weeks ago. So we're just short of being a full board. Of course, we'll have that remedied as soon as possible, but I thought it appropriate to mention Gene, as he's been an Evanston resident for lifelong, lived here his entire life, and he's worked very diligently in the community his entire life. So Gene will be sadly missed. We are a representative of interested community groups, i.e. schools, boards, social service agencies, mental health professionals, and the like, and we report to the Human Services Committee. Brief history of our board, and Alderman Grover, this should look familiar to you. In 1965, the Evanston PTA Council recognized the growing need for mental health services and established an advisory committee, which became the Evanston Mental Health Society, or EMHS. In 1966, EMHS initiated an assessment of the community's mental health needs. The following year, in 1967, Illinois legislature enacted the Community Mental Health Act, House Bill 708. The act gives cities the power to establish 7-member mental health boards by mayoral appointment to administer the act. Because the act was proposed as House Bill 708, such community mental health boards are also known as 708 boards. The act empowers cities to operate and regulate local facilities providing mental health services to be defined by the local community health board, mental health board, 405 ILCS and 20-3A. The act also gives a mayor the power to appoint 2 additional board members. In 1968, Evanston voters approved submission of a referendum to create an Evanston Mental Health Board, empowered to levy taxes and expand mental health services. The referendum passed on April 1st, 1969. Evanston was the first Illinois municipality to pass such a referendum. The 1969 ordinance did not prescribe the board's purpose. Rather, it made general references to mental health and mental retardation. The city code was amended in 1969, 73, 74, 77, and 1979. Those amendments added language that expanded the original reference to mental health and mental retardation to include alcoholism, controlled substances addiction, or use of cannabis, or developmental disabilities. In 1983, Evanston exercised its home rule authority to consolidate budgeting and nullify the Mental Health Board's levy authority. The Mental Health Board's budget is now subject to Evanston city budget policy. In 1993, as a result of the 1991 halving of the Evanston City Council, the council from here on out, from 18 aldermen to 9, the council acted to consolidate certain city boards and commissions by ordinance number 19-0-93, amending section 2-7-1 of the Evanston City Code. Herefore, the code, the council removed the requirement that an alderman serve on the Mental Health Board. In 2002, the Mental Health Board and Human Services Committee funding was consolidated. Mental Health Board funded 19 programs and 14 mental health agencies, and the Human Services Committee funded 13 social service agencies. It was determined to preserve the Mental Health Board's history, philosophy, and powers, as well as its name and mission as reflected in the Mental Health Board's bylaws and policies in the Evanston City Code. Respect to the Mental Health Board's role in community education and advocacy for mental health services. The board's mission is to ensure the existence of the best possible environment for the promotion of mental health and other human services in Evanston. The board oversees programs serving people with or at risk of having mental and emotional disorders or problems, developmental disabilities, and substance abuse problems. The board recognizes and supports a broad definition of community mental health that includes a variety of human services. The board is responsible for establishing, funding, evaluating, and assessing effective mental health and other human service programs for Evanston residents. These programs and services shall be accessible and responsive to community needs and shall be available to all Evanston residents regardless of the ability to pay. And the board shall promote community mental health and other human service system improvements, support and defend those residents with special needs, and educate the community about important mental health and other human service issues. The city staff role on the board is to support Mental Health Board operations, assist in implementing its mission, administer agency contracts, monitor agency performance, serve as a board and community resource, advocate for clients, and assist in accessing community resources. And our work plan, which you should have in front of you, our first goal is to continue to improve the Mental Health Board's funding and review process to increase agency accountability and meet the Mental Health Board needs of Evanston residents by fine-tuning the current application, rating tool, and quarterly report, identifying funding priorities and additional or new agency providers by July 2013. Our second goal is to identify opportunities for community outreach and advocacy that promotes awareness around mental health issues and educates the community about existing mental health resources on a continual basis. And our third goal is to continue to develop strong mental health board members through the provision of at least 2 meaningful board development opportunities each year. Now I'll take any questions that you might have.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cochran, and thank you, Mr. Webb, for all your work for the Mental Health Board. Back when I was on the board, we did an estimate of how many Evanston residents we thought had been touched by or received services as a result of the Mental Health Board funding, and I think years ago it was like 7,800 Evanston residents who had been touched by those programs or services. Are the numbers still so high? 8,000 now you're estimating. People positively affected by these services. And belated happy birthday. And we talked before the meeting, but Evanston's Mental Health Board was not only the first in the state, but it kind of led the way in the state of Illinois for awareness of mental health challenges and directing funds and attention that way. And it's 52 years now Evanston's had this Mental Health Board, which is quite extraordinary, actually. One of the maybe last remaining mental health boards. And I did have another question. I can't remember, though.
Thank you.
Mayor Tisdale?
Yes, under Mental Health Board Work Plan, page 1, it says, activities, develop a committee to continue to examine the current application rating tool and quarterly report to determine usefulness in areas of potential improvement. I was curious about the quarterly report. Are agencies whom you fund supposed to give you a quarterly report?
They are supposed to, and they do.
And how complex? I'm concerned that we not give them so little money that it all goes to administration to administer the grant. How involved is the quarterly report?
It gives a breakdown of Evanston residents served as opposed to their overall clientele, a demographic of racial breakdown, and then it asks if they're meeting the specific goals that they've laid out in the beginning of the funding process.
Okay. Do you think you could send me a copy of one of those sometime?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Now, as I recall, they can do it online. They can do it electronically. The reports are filed electronically.
You can send it to me electronically. I don't care. I'd just like to see it.
Okay.
Those quarter reports have always been required and always been done as far as back as I can remember.
Oh, I'm sure they're getting done.
Right. Well, I don't see any other lights. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you all.
Okay. All right. Now we'll have a special treat. I think the football coach is here from the high school with a presentation. Athletic director, I'm sorry.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for interrupting your session so that I can present this gift to Mayor Tisdall. I understand...
I was hoping I would get one of those to even out my desk.
Well, I've heard you had the Northwestern helmet on the desk.
I know, and I've been hoping. I'm glad to see you.
Thanksgiving's coming up soon. I didn't want Doug to be upset with you for not having Evanston represented on your desk for football. So I just want to present this to you, also in honor of our football team making the playoffs for 2 years in a row. And we're excited to... That's right. Probably next to the Wildcat helmet.
Thank you very much, and this is something that I have wanted ever since I got the NU one, so
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay.
And I also just want to thank you guys for, it sounds like you're trying to help get some federal money to help support the Church Street crosswalk and signage to make that safer for all of our fans. So I just want to thank you guys for pursuing that. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Livatino. Okay. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the 2012 City Council meeting calendar. You all received those in your packet. Are there any questions about it?
Yeah, may I?
Go ahead, Grover.
There were a couple meetings that happened on Monday meetings on 3-day weekends. The MLK, Monday, January 16th, and I believe, can't remember the other one, President's Day weekend, whatever that is. Were we thinking about moving those to the Tuesday instead of putting them on the Monday of a 3-day weekend?
Oh, I didn't think those were meetings.
Madam Chair, Alderman Grover, that has been the council's practice, and even in some cases, the council has moved the meeting even further into the week from time to time. I think you've done Tuesday from time to time, or excuse me, Wednesday, right after the Christmas holiday. I think last year we did. So if you'd like, we can have the 17th of January be the date for the third Monday meeting. Is the 17th rather than the 16th.
And whatever the President's Day weekend.
Do you know the date?
I'm looking.
I think it's noted here.
Alderman Rainey has her line.
I'm sorry, Alderman Rainey?
Oh, wait, is the city manager going to answer a question?
No, go ahead.
In the middle of, well, it looks to me like the 16th is the third meeting, right? I mean, it's not a regular standing committee council meeting.
Right, and it's
It's now a regular meeting under the council's rules, but it's not. There is not P&D and AMPW.
Right. But I would suggest for those two events, because they are school holidays and things, that we just not have that third meeting in January and February. I mean, we can do without it sometimes. I mean, we need the third meeting when we're having budget stuff. I'm losing my voice.
Well, I would especially think that January, because it's Martin Luther King's birthday, so I wouldn't be
But I
here.
mean, just forget the meeting. Don't move it to a Tuesday unless we have an emergency.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Unless we have
And then the other third Monday meeting that conflicted with a school holiday was President's Day on February 20th, Monday, February 20th.
People use
Those are the two 3-day weekends. They're both third Monday meetings.
We'd be happy. I mean, if the council's preference, as Alderman Rainey said,
Either
hopefully
cancel
the
them
cycle recites itself at the beginning of the year. There'll be less business before the
Right.
council.
May I move? I'd like to make a motion to, I move to remove the third council meeting in January and February, to delete it, to eliminate it.
Is there a second?
Second.
The third Monday.
It would be January 16th and February 20th, 2012. Those
Okay.
are both school holidays on 3-day weekends.
It has been moved and seconded that the January and February meetings on the third Monday be removed for the 2012 calendar. And it's all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. It's done. Is there anything else with the calendar? If not, I want a motion to accept then the rest of the calendar.
I move to accept the rest of the calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that concludes our agenda. Unless there's new business, City Manager, anything else?
No, just a reminder that the council would need to convene for a closed session.
So I move unless there's anything else.
Okay, go ahead.